and Vugu Nayosi, Black Revolutionary Now. Just want to bring you this video on this young Black airman, Roger Fortson, who was murdered by this white supremacist cop inside of his own home. Yes, once again, another young Black person murdered inside of their home for doing absolutely nothing. And we know this is not a rare case when coming to us, because Breonna Taylor, Donovan Lewis, Akai Gurley, Botham Jean, Atiana Jefferson, and many more who was murdered by these white supremacist goon squad. And we know that we are a target on so many levels. I just wanted just to highlight that and bring you this video on Professor Black Truth, breaking down more specifically on the young Black airman who was gunned down in cold blood by this white supremacist cop from Florida, Ron DeSantis, racist, Florida. Check out this video.
You know, there's a number of killings that take place. When they happen, the only thing that I feel is just pure, unadulterated rage. And that being the case, given my temperament and character, it's probably best not to say anything, especially not immediately. You know how I am. But I'm definitely going to speak on this. Tatiana Jefferson, Botham Jean, Akai Gurley, Breonna Taylor, countless others, and now Roger Fortson can be added to that list of innocent Black people who were murdered in their own homes simply because. Black people being ambushed and murdered by police while standing in their own homes is part of standard operating procedure for the thugs in blue. And sure, you can say, well, Akai Gurley was in a stairway, wasn't he? He was in the stairway of the apartment building that he lived in. He was the one in the right. Peter Liang was the one in the wrong. And there is no debate about that. But for the thugs in blue, killing Black people in their own homes, that's standard operating procedure. And yet, you got the clowns like the NAACP talking out both sides of their mouths, trying to simultaneously say, well, we don't want these guys just moving from agency to agency, and at the same time still talking that stupid stuff about, well, the police need better training, de-escalation training. This guy fired on this young man the moment that the door opened. This is not a situation of escalation here. This was a matter of an ambush. At this late date, they still are talking like this. The NAACP showing exactly why we walked away from them decades ago. Generation X walked away from these clowns, and now you see why. But then again, this is the NAACP we're talking about here. Nobody expects them to say anything intelligent. But allow me to repeat that for you again, because it ain't going to be the last time I mention it. Tatiana Jefferson, Botham Jean, Akai Gurley, Breonna Taylor, and now Roger Fortson. You have case after case after case across the country, all with the exact same MO. The police show up. They do not identify themselves. Aaron Dean, who murdered Tatiana Jefferson, he never identified himself. Sneaking around outside of her house, he never identified himself. Gun drawn, pointed at the house, never identifies himself. Amber Geiger, same thing. She never identified herself before she opened fire on Botham Jean. And the same thing with Peter Liang. And the same thing with the thugs in the Louisville PD. And the same thing with Roger Fortson. And before anybody gets ready to say, well, the man who murdered him did identify himself eventually. Really? Is that what the police would accept? If somebody ran up on the police with a gun, would they say, well, you didn't identify yourself as someone other than the suspect before we shot you? Is that what they would say? Again, case after case after case nationwide. All of them with the exact same MO. The cops show up. They do not identify themselves, but they have their guns out already in a circumstance where there is no threat. There's nobody even around. There's innocent, unarmed people all around them, and then they barge in on someone else's home, or they just open fire from outside the home most of the time. The instant they see a black person, the instant they even think they see a black person, they immediately open fire. Just like Donovan Lewis. He was the young man you'll recall who was murdered in his bed when the police snuck into his apartment. And they did not see a gun, didn't even see him. It's just the moment that they thought they saw a black person, you had this thug with a gun. He decides that he's going to loose a shot. He's just going to go ahead and fire a blind shot around a corner into a bedroom. Doesn't even know who the hell is in there. Doesn't care. All he knew was this is a black person's apartment. And the second that I see him, I can go ahead and say, well, I thought I saw something. So the NAACP can get out of here with this crap about de-escalation training. In the case of Donovan Lewis, there was no escalation. He didn't know what the hell was going on, and neither did they, but they knew that there was a black person there and that they were armed and he wasn't. That much they knew. They set this stuff up, man. They had these little cop seminars where they sit around talking about the best ways to ambush black people. And here's the lie that you can use afterwards, your get out of jail free card. Yeah, we took away the whole I was scared for my life thing, so they've tried to resort to other stuff. But mostly they've been relying on these unscrupulous DAs and these crooked judges. That's what they've been relying on. But we're going to take that away from them too before it's all over. No, NAACP, you're dead wrong. This is not a matter of training. This is a matter of the long-standing institutional culture of American policing, which is the enforcement arm of anti-black violence in America. That's the problem. You cannot retrain a white supremacist. You can only punish them. And that's what's lacking here. Remember, what happened to this young man is exactly what happened to a Tatiana Jefferson. Some busybody made a call to the police. Cops show up waiting in ambush, and the second that they even think they see somebody, they immediately open fire. But also, this is what I believe was a reprisal for the 4 cops who got killed in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago. Now, that incident happened under very sketchy circumstances. You better be more than a little dubious about the narrative that the white media has handed you on that one. The thugs in blue, they make it a point that when something like this happens, oh, they heard about a cop got killed, oh, there was a black person who they claim did it. The next thing you know, somebody goes and commits some heinous ambush killing to send a message. And don't kid yourself. If it wasn't this, it would have been something else, because it always is. We've seen this movie enough times to know exactly how the story goes. And you can tell the white media is confused on this. Oh, not confused about what they want to do, but confused as to how to do it. How are we going to dirty this guy up? How are we going to craft a lie that the black man was responsible for his own murder? See, the usual tactics simply won't work here. You got a military veteran, a man who's well regarded by the people around him, and also somebody who you can't claim that, oh, he's got priors or whatever. They can't trash him. They can't cast aspersions on him. But then again, they couldn't do that with Tamir Rice either, or Philandro Castile, or with Freddie Gray or Breonna Taylor, and they still made sure that those race soldiers got away with it. But the white media, they would love to try if they could. The sheriff's department, the police out there, they would love to be able to go ahead and demonize him and say, oh, he's had priors, no, plenty of priors, except the guy happens to be a military veteran. Man wearing the country's uniform. Yeah, trying to use those tactics won't work, so what they're doing instead is they're trying to stall for time. They're trying to see if they can wait out the public. Can they get the headlines to change? Keep in mind, that's exactly what they did with the murder of a Tatiana Jefferson. Tried to run out the clock. Let's take years and years and years. Let's drag this out as long as possible. We'll have the judge on the case recused. Anything to buy more time. Oh, people are still paying attention to it? Okay, let's just give another continuance and another and another. And they kept doing that over and over again until eventually they had no choice but to go to trial, and the bastard was, predictably, comfortingly convicted. Oh, they thought to themselves that the public would forget, but the black grassroots never forgets. Yeah, we keep those names alive, especially so people understand the tally of the murdered and who the murderers are. Now, you got the family and their lawyers for Mr. Fortson, we'll get to them later, saying that the police went to the wrong address. Now, while that is certainly true, it's also irrelevant. This is not a case of they went to the wrong address. They go to wrong addresses all the time, and they don't shoot the first person that they see. He didn't pull that gun on that man by mistake. When he banged on the door, he did not identify himself. He covered the peephole. He stood off to the side, and by the time he finally bothered to say, hey, sheriff's department, whoever was inside that apartment would have had every justification to think that this is a thief or this is a setup for a home invasion. Mr. Fortson had every right to have his gun. Truth be told, I think there would have been something wrong with him if he hadn't. That race soldier instigated this. He did everything that he could to make it seem as if there's some stranger out here banging on the door, because it is. Mr. Fortson didn't know this guy. He did not identify himself, didn't do anything. He just shows up, bang, 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 bang. Open up. He had his hand on his gun while he was standing there. That's not the behavior of somebody who doesn't want to kill someone. That's someone who's waiting for an opening. This is somebody who's doing this. I'm going to keep my hand on my gun. Now, if a white person answers the door, I'm going to say, what's the problem? But if I even think they're black, oh, I thought I saw something. Oh, how good. The guy had a gun. Well, I did kind of startle him now, didn't I? You know exactly what any common sense response would be. You're minding your own business. You're doing FaceTime with a family member or a girlfriend or whomever. And then out of the blue, someone starts banging on your door like they don't have any sense. That's meant to startle you. That's meant to get a fight or flight response. So you go ahead and make sure you got protection with you. But finally, somebody says that they're with the sheriff's department. You have no obligation to actually put your sidearm away, especially considering the fact that these red states have given everyone the right to carry anywhere, anytime. And the place where you have the most right to carry is inside your own domicile. There need to be laws and lawsuits regarding the people who call the police circumstances like this. Individuals who decide, let's go ahead and lead the police to who our intended victim is. Anytime there's a police-involved shooting, the case needs to be handled by a special prosecutor chosen by the victim, or in cases like this where the police murder someone, chosen by the family of the victim. But whoever is chosen to prosecute the case, it has to be somebody who is not one of the colleagues or co-workers of these killers. Because this is the reason why this stuff always goes unanswered. That's something that needs to happen. New laws need to be put on the books along with individuals who will actually enforce them. It's way past time civilized society got tough with these little race soldiers running around. And by the way, speaking of race soldiers, you got the sheriff out there still concealing the identity of the murderer. We in the black media told you that this was going to become part of the norm as we continue to put pressure on the enemy. We told you that they would go ahead and start deciding to do anything that they could because they can't trust these juries anymore to throw the case. Oh, sure, it can still happen a lot. But they can't rest on it anymore. They can't depend on that anymore. So now it's a matter of fine then. We're going to have a complete media blackout. What they don't want is anyone to start digging up the dirty past to whoever the killer is. This is meant as a way to try to divert or otherwise dissipate public anger, the righteous anger that the public has to demand that justice be done. After all, you put pressure on the police department by pointing to exactly who it is who needs to be punished. The idea here is, well, there's not going to be an identity. It's just going to be some nameless, faceless individual. This is the exact same tactic that they used after the murder of Jordan Neely. They didn't say who Daniel Penny was. And they went like a week without saying that. They wanted to go several days. The white media was fully on board with that. There was a complete media blackout. You don't get that unless everybody's in collusion on this. And the same thing's happening here. They think that by concealing the killer's identity, that this is going to make it easier to bury his crime. It'll make it easier for this to all blow over, because after all, people are demanding justice, but they don't know who it is who's supposed to be punished. That's the tactic here. Of course, this is Ron DeSantis' Florida, naturally. But I want to know right now, where the hell's the NRA at? Where are the gun nuts at for the white right? Where are the black bootlicks who shill for the white right and always talk about how important it is that, those gun rights guys, they're talking about the black community too. We have a right to exercise our Second Amendment. Yeah, well, they should be the main ones demanding punishment too, shouldn't they? But they're not. You got a U.S. military veteran murdered in his own home by a thug with a badge. And here you got this man exercising his Second Amendment right. He has the right to answer the door with a gun. If the cops didn't like it, they can blame their own red state legislators for that. Now, whenever you play the video, what happens is this thug guns this young man down, and then after he shot him 5 or 6 times, says, "Drop the gun." And then later on, as he's bleeding out, he goes, "Stop moving." This is murder, plain and simple. And yet you got the thugs in blue down there in Florida circling the wagons. They're making it very clear. They know exactly what this is. Of course it's murder. This is part of what they think of as pushing the envelope. Hey, these niggers have spent too long making sure that we're held accountable. Now we're going to do a murder that's just blatant. It's going to be just a completely and thoroughly naked murder. There is nothing else to be called. And we're going to say, well, there's not going to be anything that's done about it. That's what they're attempting to do here. Concealing the identity of the murderer, that's all part of it. But then again, the same way that the white right was totally silent when Philando Castile was murdered, they're silent now. So what does that tell you? This isn't about the Second Amendment. These white right-wingers want to make sure that black people, they understand, well, when we talk about Second Amendment rights, that doesn't mean you people. Oh yeah, they'll send out a couple of black shills to say it. But the white ones who are actually the ones who put up the money and the ones who like to go lobby the legislatures and say, you better not touch those gun rights, where are they at to say Mr. Fortson's death is the perfect example of why it is that even the cops need to be reined in. You can't fire on someone even when they're holding a gun. You can only fire if they're pointing it at you. This happened in Florida because Ron DeSantis has spent years letting everyone know that he wants violence to be carried out against black people in Florida. That's why that mass murder of black Floridians happened last year. DeSantis has been using his office as a full-time advocacy forum for hatred and most of all to advocate for violence against black Floridians. And of course the police are going to join in with it. DeSantis takes pictures with them all the time, constantly tells them about how they're too reined in. I back you guys no matter what you do. Wink, wink. Wink and a nod. He's constantly going to those guys and constantly letting them know, no matter what you get accused of, I'm on your side. That right there says everything. He doesn't need to spell it out after that. As soon as he makes it clear, hey, I'm with you guys no matter what you do. Yeah, okay, we all know what that means. When we get out here and kill some black people, he's on our side no matter what we do. So when I hear that the statewide investigation agency is supposed to be looking into this murder, I think it bears noting that the GOP-controlled legislature in Florida passed a law that lets DeSantis remove anyone in government office, including elected officials. Oh, you think that your mayor is somehow supposed to be your mayor? Well, not if DeSantis doesn't like him. If DeSantis doesn't like him, he can say, I think that guy should be removed. So do you think that these state-level investigators are going to do anything that DeSantis doesn't want done? But then again, given the putrid track record of Merrick Garland's Justice Department, I'm not holding my breath for them to do any good here. Kristen Clark looks for reasons not to bring cases against the police or against anyone else who murders black people. So these types of ambushes are what the thugs in blue are doing next, and going to be a lot more of it if they can help it. Now more than ever, black people need to be prepared to protect themselves. The politicians are the ones who encourage this violence. So it's not going to stop until black people make it clear in completely unequivocal terms that this violence will not be tolerated. And yes, I know Mushmouth Crump is out there, but he was also buzzing around during the efforts to punish Ahmaud Arbery's murderers too. So we've had an impact in forcing him to stop aggressively pushing these families into saying we forgive the murderers. He had to fall back with all that. However, this isn't about him. This is about the police who are making it a clear pattern. This is part of the plan. There's an agenda. There's a program at work here. And that is, whenever you go to a place that black people reside at, if you're hanging around outside, stalking around outside, you just make sure the first person you see you shooting. Doesn't matter if it's a man, woman, or a child, preferably a child. And if you actually can't get them at the outside of the house, then as soon as someone answers the door, open fire on them. That's what they did with Breonna Taylor. That's what they did with this young man. Okay, well, if they don't go for that one, then when you get inside the place, go ahead and shoot them then. Like they did with Botham Jean, and like they did with Donovan Lewis. Because when it comes to the thugs in blue, they're not looking for a reason to kill a black person. They're not even looking for an opportunity to kill a black person. They're just looking for a black person to kill.
Peace and black power. Black revolutionary now.